Exponential test review. Number 1 says the expression x to the 11th times x to the 1/4 to the 16th power is equivalent to x to the m. What is the value of m? So it just wants to know the final exponent. Okay, so knowing that, we have to simplify this. So first things first is we have to do power to a power. Okay, so 16 times 1/4. If we don't know, we should go straight to our calculator. So 16 times 1/4 gives us 4. So we have, I'm going to rewrite, I have x to the 11th because I haven't done anything to that. And now I have times x to the 4th power because I multiplied power to a power. Now I'm multiplying, which means I add my exponent. So it's 11 plus 4. That gives me, x to the 15th power. And then I'm done. So again, it only wants to know what my exponent is, and my exponent is 15. So my exponent is 15. Okay, so look at number 2. Number 2 says simplify the expression a to the 3rd, b to the 9th, divided by b 4th over a, and choose the correct value of the exponent for each term. So we need to figure out what goes to the exponent here and here. Okay, well, knowing that, I'm going to have to rewrite it. A to the 3rd, b to the 9th, divided by b4 over a. So I don't know what your teachers told you, but I taught my kids the corny saying, dividing fractions is easy as pie. Flip the second and multiply. So we're going to rewrite it. So I need to flip whatever's after the division sign, the second. So I get a to the 3rd, b to the 9th, which I want you to realize is a fraction of over 1. Flip it, and I get a over b to the 4th, and I change it to multiplication. Okay, well, knowing that, I'm going to go ahead and multiply. I'm going to simplify the top and simplify the bottom. So I have a to the 3rd and a to the 1st power, and when I'm multiplying, I add my exponents. So that gives me a to the 4th and b to the 9th. And on bottom, I have 1 times b to the 4th, which is just b to the 4th. Well, now I have to divide. I don't have any more a's, so I have a to the 4th, and I have more b's on top, so b stays on top, and I subtract. What's 9 minus 4 is 5, and so I have a to the 4th power and b to the 5th power, which are both options, so there is my answer. Okay, so let's look at number 3. Number 3 says the area of a rectangle. Right away, I know area equals length times width is this. So I know my area is this, and my length is this, and it says find the width. Well, if I want to find my width, how do I get width by itself? Well, I have to get rid of this multiplication. So how do I get rid of multiplication? I divide. I'm going to divide both sides by length, and I get width equals area divided by length. So knowing that, I'm going to take my area, which is 20x to the 7, y to the 5, over my length, which is 4x to the 3rd, y squared, and I'm going to simplify. So the big thing to remember is when we're dividing, we subtract exponents. However, we treat big numbers like normal. So if we struggle with fractions, not a big deal. We're going to use our calculator. I'm going to type 20 divide 4, and it gives me 5, which is a whole number. So I'm going to write 5 on top. Okay, where do I have more x's? Well, I have more x's on top, and we subtract. 7 minus 3 is 4. I have more y's also on top, and 5 minus 2 is 3. So there's my answer, which is B. Okay, the next one says which expression is equivalent. Equivalent just wants you to simplify and see what it equals. So I always tell my students that we have to get rid of power to a power first, and I see that I have power to a power on bottom, and I tell them we have to have an exponent on everything. So 5 to the 1st power, y to the 1st power, and we multiply. 2 times 1, that gives me 5 squared. 2 times 2 gives me x to the 4th. 2 times 1 gives me y squared, and I'm going to rewrite the top. And now I'm just dividing. So I'm going to divide the numbers just the way I see them in my calculator. And I get 50 divided by 5 squared. and that gives me 2. I have more x's on top, so just like the last one, we're going to subtract. 9 minus 4 is 5. And I have more y's on top. 7 minus 2 is also 5, so there's my answer, which is A. Okay, number 5 is here. So it says a table of values for the exponential function f is shown. The values represent the value of a car over a period of 5 years. So I know that years is my x because time is my x. And I know that this is my value, therefore my money. Which exponential regression is used to determine a function? So we need to find my a and my b, and I want you to remember that a is our starting point, or our initial value. Well, I already know, actually I don't know, because it starts at 1, and we need to remember that our initial value is where it's 0, and then we need to find our exponential regression, which is whatever our b is. Okay, it's our multiplier, our common factor. So we're going to come to our calculator, and we're going to do plus sign table, and we're using regression, which is the y1 squiggle, but we have to type in our table first. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And my x's are 2, 1, 6, 7, 5. Okay, so there's my table. And then on the second line, I have to do my y1 squiggle. y1 squiggle, a, parentheses, b, parentheses, all to the x power, and we x1. So here's my equation. So I know a is 2550014, and b is 0.849992. I just wrote it down so we can look at it with our paper. Okay, so this is what the calculator gave me. Well, we're going to look at our answer options. So 255004, 0.4, sorry, is closest to this one. So this is my A. And B is 0.849992. So if I round it to the nearest hundred place, that's 0.89 makes that round up, which is 5. So right here is my B. Okay, flip, we're going to look at number 6. Okay, number 6 says a population of mutant Venus flytrap planes are taking over an island in the South Pacific, capturing everything from insects to small rodents. When they were first discovered, they covered 4 square kilometers. As the population grows, the plants spread and cover more land. About how many kilometers squared will be covered after 7 years? So here's my years and my kilometers squared. This is my x and my y. Well, I want to know when x is 7, what y is. So we're going to type this in our calculator. Plus sign table. Okay, and we're going to do the y1 squiggle because we're going to make it give us our equation. y1 squiggle, a parentheses b, all to the x1 power. And I have this, so I'm going to write my equation. I don't even have to write my equation. So right away, I know that I want to know when x equals 7, and I can find where they touch, which is going to be over here. So it's going to be 144.853. So I know that this is my answer, and I'm looking for which one's the closest, which is B at 145. Okay. Next one we are looking at is number 7. it says which inequality best represents the range, which is our y. Okay, so when we're looking at our range, I want you to know that we're not looking at our x values. I'm crossing them out so they don't confuse us. We're only looking at y. Okay, so knowing that, I know that the lowest this goes is here. It's kind of hard to tell with this big old dot. Okay, so my lowest, remember we go bottom to top. So my bottom is -7 and my top is 3. So I know that A and B are not my answers. Okay, I know we're talking about y or f of x, and I know we always use less than. Now at -7, I have an open dot, so it's not equal to. But at 3, I have a closed dot, so it's equal to. So my answer is B. Okay, let's look at number 8. It says, what is the equation of the asymptote of the graph of the function y equals 6.25, or 6 times 0.25 to the x power? So we're going to type it in. Y equals 6 parentheses 0.25 to the x power. And we're going to hit the home. It's going to zoom in. So remember, I want you to realize the asymptote is where this like ramp turns into the floor. Do you see how my y is just getting closer and closer to 0? It actually ends up rounding it to 0, even though it doesn't touch 0. So I know that my asymptote is y equals 0. Now I want you to realize we have not dealt with any x equals 0s or x equals anything. We've only been dealing with horizontal asymptotes, which is always y equals. So we have y equals 0. Okay, number 9 says which equation is representative of the graph. So before we even look at our calculator, let's go ahead and start. Well, I want you to know that this point, which is at 2, is my starting point. That's my A. So A is 2. It's my y-intercept. So I know that B is not my answer. And I see that this is growth. And I want you to remember growth is when B is greater than 1. And decay is when B is between 0 and 1. So here I need B to be greater than 1 because it's growth. It's going up from left to right. And this is 1/3, which is smaller than 1. So A is my only option. Okay. So let's look at number 10. 10 is the same concept. Okay, so if we look at number 10, same concept. Now this time is decay. So remember, during decay, B has to be between 0 and 1. So let's start there. 1/2 is 0.5. 4 is not between 0 and 1. 2 is not between 0 and 1. 1/2 is 0.5. So we're between A and D. And my starting point is right here, which is at 1, 2, 3, 4. So A is 4. So A is my answer. Okay, when I look at number 11, it says the table represents some points of an exponential function. Which of the following calculations can be determined to find the growth factor? I want you to remember, your growth factor is your multiplier. So if I want to find it, I can do the opposite and divide. So I could do 3 divided by 2. Remember, it's bottom divide top. So 3 divided by 2, or I could do 4.5 divided by 3. And I see that one right here at B. Okay, number 12 says simplify using your exponent rules. Well, I want you to remember anything to the 0 power equals 1, because A to the 0 equals 1. Anything to the 0 power equals 1. This whole thing is to the 0 power, so this whole thing equals 1. Okay, let's look at 13. 13 says which expression is equivalent. So here we're multiplying. There's no power on the outside of the parentheses, so I don't have power to a power. Remember, we treat our coefficients, our big numbers, like normal. So 8 times 2 is 16. And then when we multiply our rule, I'm going to write the rule over here. A_n times A_n equals A to the n plus n. We add our exponents. Okay, so knowing that, I have A and A. And if there's no exponent, it's a 1. So 1 plus 2 is 3. And then 4 plus 5 for B is 9. So there's my answer. I know it's not this one or this one because it's 16. 8 times 2 is 16. A to the third, B to the ninth is C. Okay, let's look at 14. This one is power to a power. I know that because I have parentheses with an exponent on the outside. So power to a power means we multiply it. We have to multiply every exponent on the inside. Therefore, everything on the inside has to have an exponent. C has an exponent, D has an exponent, we're good. So 4 times 1/2 is C2. And then 4 times 1/5, well, if we don't know, we're going to use our calculator. So I'm going to do 4 times 1/5, and I get 0.8, which is 4/5. So my answer is A. And I want you to realize it's because our rule is A to the m times n equals A m n. And remember, when there's no symbol, it means multiply. Okay, let's look at 15. 15 says choose two statements about this. So I want you to remember this is my A and this is my B. And A is my starting point / y-intercept. B is my common factor or my growth / decay factor. Okay, so knowing that this is talking about domain and range, so really we didn't need to see that. Well, let's graph it. Okay, so I have this, and this is what it looks like. So I'm going to sketch it on my paper. And it looks like this. And I want you to realize your asymptote is right here on the x-axis, which is where y equals 0. So it never goes below that line. Okay, so knowing that, domain, well, it goes to the left forever, and it goes to the right. If I continue this, it's going to keep going to the right. So my domain is all real numbers. Now my range is not all real numbers because it would have to go down forever, and it doesn't. It never goes below my asymptote, which is 0. So it starts at 0 and goes up forever. But remember, 0, your asymptote, it never touches, so it's not going to be equal to. This one says equal to, so that's not it. The range is all real numbers greater than 0, so that's my answer. It's never going to touch the asymptote, so there is my answers. Okay, let's look at number 16. 16 says, for the function f of x equals 300, 1.16 to the x can be used to determine the amount of Teslas in Houston after x years, which two statements are true. So again, remember, A is my start, my initial value, and B is this is a growth factor because it's greater than 1, so growth factor. And I want you to remember the way we find that is 1 plus our r. Well, 1 plus, that's going to be, my r is 0.16, which if I multiply by 100, it will tell me the percent. So I know that 0.16 times 100 is 16%. Okay, so knowing that, let's look. So it says the growth factor of the Tesla in Houston is 1.16. Well, again, that's my growth factor, so that is true. The initial amount of Teslas in Houston is 116. Well, my starting point is 300, so that's not true. The amount of Teslas after the first year is 300. That's not true because my starting point, remember, is where x equals 0. The initial amount of Teslas decreased. Well, we already said that it's bigger than 1, so it's growth. And this is the initial amount of Teslas increased at a rate of 16% per year. We just determined that, so here are my two answers. Okay, so let's look at 17. It says which expression is equivalent. Well, I always tell my students power to a power first, which I don't have any of that. I have no parentheses with exponents on the outside. And then I'm going to move my negatives. So I circle my negatives and I move it to the bottom. It's on the top and I rewrite it as positive, cross it off. Circle it, move it to the bottom, rewrite it as positive, cross it off. Circle it, move it to the top, and cross it off. And I'm going to rewrite this because this is a mess. So I have 8 x to the 4, which stayed, and I move that y to the third to the top. On the bottom, I have 8x squared z4, y4, z3. And now I have to divide. Or actually, I'm going to start with multiplying. So first off, nothing on the top simplifies. Whoa. And on the bottom, I still have my 8. I have x. There's no more x's, so it's just x squared. I have z and z. Well, let's write our y first. y4. 4 plus 3. So now on the same level, that means multiply, so we add. Why did I write y again? Z to the 7th. And now I'm going to divide. Well, 8 divided by 8 is 1. I have more x's on top, and I subtract. 4 minus 2 is 2. I have more y's on bottom. 4 minus 3 is 1. And I only have z on the bottom, so z to the 7th. Now remember, the 1s are optional, optional, optional. So I have x squared on top. Oh my gosh, I'm a dummy. This was a 4. This was a 4. Okay, 8 divided by 4. Sorry about that, y'all. I make mistakes too. 8 divided by 4 is 2. So this is 2, not 1. So I have 2x squared. Sorry about that. Over yz to the 7th, which is a. Don't know how I missed that. Okay. Let's look at 18. Write an equation, I think it should say that models the following situation. Tiffany bought a phone case for $6. So I know my initial value, my A, is $6, and it depreciates. As soon as I know I have a percent, I have to do 1 plus or minus, and if it's depreciating, that means it's decay, which is minus, and I have to turn my percent into a decimal. So we're going to divide. Percent divided by 100 gives me 0.14. So 1 minus 0.14, because remember we do divided by 100 to find my decimal. Okay, so knowing that, I have to type out my calculator. 1 minus 0.14, and I get 0.86. So I know my B, 0.86. So A is 6, B is 0.86. Okay, look at 19. It says the value of a car can be predicted by this equation. What would be the approximate value after 5 years? So I know that I want to know when X is 5. 5 is my years, or X is my year. So there's 2 ways to do this. You could type your equation in just the way you see it. Y equals 15000 parentheses 0.88 to the x power. And I could pull up my table and I look for where years is 5. So I get 7915.9, round that to 8. Or I could literally just type to the 5th power, because it's 5 years, and that also gives me the same answer. So I get this, which is money, and so I know 7915.98, but it rounded up to 6, so here's my answer. Okay, number 20 says, what is the value of the y-intercept? Well, I want you to remember, A is your y-intercept. So my y-intercept is 2. Almost done. Okay, number 21 says the graph represents the decrease of population of bacteria over time. Which inequality best represents range? Well, I want you to realize anything from here this way is not in use because we're talking about real time. So elapsed hours. We can't go backwards in hours. So we start at, what is that? 150? I know my highest, we're talking about range, so I'm only looking at my x values. Y values. Don't look at x. So my highest is 150. And my lowest is really my asymptote, which is y equals 0, so it's never going to touch 0. So remember, we go least to greatest. And if it doesn't touch 0, this won't be equal to, but it does touch 150, so that is equal to. So my answer is C. Last question. It says, which of the following functions models an exponential decay? So the biggest thing to remember is that b, when it's decaying, has to be between 0 and 1. Okay, well, 1.66 is bigger, so that's not my answer. 40 divided by 80, if we don't know, we can type it in our calculator. 40 divided 80 is 0.5. So that is decay. That's between 0 and 1. Here, this isn't even an exponential equation, so that's definitely not my answer. 80 divided by 40 is 2, so that's bigger than 1. That's not my answer. And B, 0.77 is between 0 and 1, so B and C are my answer. And that is your test for you. Good luck on your test. Have a great day.